fiends, and welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. We are back. We are live. We are, business as usual, but I have to say, after last week's show being the first pre-recorded show that I think we've ever done, we've had segments pre-recorded in the past, but last week was the first time we've put out a purely pre-recorded show as part of a new schedule we've got going. And whether it's the new format, whether it was the film being discussed as the main review of the show, the numbers have been pretty incredible. So I have to just say a big thank you to everyone who has downloaded the podcast, who has listened, who has watched the YouTube, who has watched the TikToks. It's been really cool to see, so I am very thankful. I don't even think I've actually said my name, in case I think I've skipped ahead in my introductions, but I'm your host as per usual, Tez, and we're back once again. We're doing the Ministry of Horror, we're doing it live, it's our live week, next week will be our recorded week, and so on and so forth. We have a live chat currently, which is popping off, which is great to see. We've got Bericles in the chat. We've got Crimson Mel of the Unexplained Possibilities podcast. He'll be getting a mention a bit later on as well. We've also got Fran, and we've got the Gruff. How's it going, guys and gals watching live, and people listening at home at your leisure on podcast or catching up on demand? I appreciate you all. Thank you very much. Now, you might be thinking, Tez, that T-shirt that you're wearing in the live feed, that looks like a very comfortable material. You'd be right in thinking that, because it's the Ministry of Horror T-shirt, baby. I've got my sample copy, arrived today, very quick. Not to toot my own horn too much, or toot the company who make them too much, but pretty pleased with it. Victoria's very pleased with it as well. It seems to fit around my arms nicely, so she's pleased in that regard. So guys, gals, ghouls and fiends, binary, non-binary, if you want to get some horror merch, check out Etsy.co.uk and search for Ministry of Horror. You should be able to find it just searching, it's 3 words, or Ministry of Horror in one word, and you'll find a t-shirt. Have a look, bunch of different colours, bunch of different sizes. Buy one for your whole family, have a little look around. Gruff in the chat says, I need to get me one of those sweet t-shirts. Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to get one of the grey ones, take the sleeves off it for the gym. It's come out quite nicely. I think what I'm probably going to do, see how it does in sales or whatnot, and maybe go on Fiverr or something, get a few designs made up by actual artists, as this design was made by Lee. People will know from the Ministry of Slam, the godfather of MOS. He kindly designed this for me back in the day, and I do enjoy the design. But I think if I were to go into doing other t-shirts, I'll have a look around and try and get but obviously I can't draw, but try and commission the sort of styles that I would like to wear on a t-shirt. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. This is out now. You can head over to Etsy, search for Ministry of Horror, see if there's a colour that takes your fancy, and rep the show. So, as I've kind of said, we've done a pre-recorded show last week. That has done incredibly well. The podcast audio has already become the most listened to in the show's history, which is really cool. So once again, for the final time in this show, I don't want to gush the whole time. Thank you very much, for listening. I really do appreciate it. And if you're watching live for the first time, hit the follow button. If you want to subscribe, but no pressure. Analytics, it all helps with algorithms and all that stuff that I've never really understood. Probably should look into at some point, who knows. Hey, we've got Eddie the Beast that's joined the chat as well. Gruff has asked, do we do it in a baby grow? Well, if the numbers are there for the current t-shirts, then who knows? I'd certainly, with the amount of coffee I drink, would look to get a Ministry of Horror mug made at some point. So Baby Grows might just be on there as well. Who knows? We shall check it out. So guys, ghouls, gals, ghouls, fiends, all that jazz. For this evening's show, I had plans to do a big featured presentation talking about legacy sequels. Part of that is coming from having done a review of Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire, which we'll talk about shortly. And that is obviously part of a legacy sequel series, started with Afterlife. But we've had many in recent years. We've got ones coming up, later this year or in the next couple of years. But this show is already going to be quite jam-packed as it is. So whilst our live shows are going to be more likely to have a featured presentation, and the podcast recorded shows are going to be news, reviews, and a retro review, I think with the number of reviews we've got today, and the fact that we're going to be doing a watch party after the live show, we'll probably save for now the featured presentation discussion. It may be more apropos to go into that when the next big horror legacy sequel comes out, such as I Know What You Did Last Summer, which hasn't gone into production yet, I don't think, but it's been announced. So who knows? Gruff says I'd love an MOH mug too. I mean, like I say, guys, if we see the numbers, then I will branch out. But yeah, I mean, Victoria may think, where are we going to put these mugs, because I already have a number of coffee cups, and I do like my coffee, but I'm sure I can make space for one with MOH on it. We shall see. So, as I was saying, in regards to doing a featured presentation, I think we may save that, because what we have for you today, guys, we have the latest in horror news, as per usual. For the reviews, we've got, I think, 4 films lined up. We are going to be talking Slayers, which I watched today. You'll hear my thoughts on that. We're going to also talk Horror in the High Desert, the first in that series. I finally got around to watching them. I've heard pretty good things about them, and the first one is on Amazon Prime now. We're going to end the show talking about Immaculate, a brand new Sydney Sweeney horror film that has hit cinemas. But in amongst those reviews, I'm going to be stepping away from the desk, stepping away from Ministry of Horror HQ for a little bit to stretch my legs, maybe grab a beer, maybe grab some sweet treats. Probably shouldn't have sweet treats, maybe some crisps, who knows. Because we have a pre-recorded review segment with the man, the myth, the legend, the at one point mouth of the Ministry of Slam back in the day, Lawrence Case. I had a great time catching up with Law this week. We kind of initially planned to just chat for 20 minutes talking about the latest entry in the Ghostbusters series, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. We actually ended up recording for well over an hour. And so what you have today, guys, is our discussion, review, and I would put this as the featured presentation, but then I'd be coming back to the live thing to just say bye. So I'm going to put it in the reviews, in amongst the reviews. What you've got is our in-depth discussion, spoiler-free, of the new Ghostbusters film. But something we touch on in that is a little bit of a treat, which is next Monday, I believe, on YouTube and podcast platforms, is a bonus Ministry of Slam spoiler episode where we discuss for about 30 minutes full spoilers for our thoughts on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. So if you haven't seen the film, you don't want any spoilers, don't worry, today's show will not spoil a thing. If you don't mind spoilers, or you have seen the film and want to hear our thoughts, then obviously watch the whole show, of course. But Monday, check your podcast feeds, check your YouTube, and you'll be able to see or hear our full spoiler-filled thoughts. I should also say, with the YouTube channel, previously I'd put the odd show here and there when I'd remember on my YouTube channel, which was Snapped Fibula Productions, Terence Elliott. Not to just drop my whole name there on the internet. That doesn't matter, who cares? But I kind of figured, well, I haven't done any film work for a couple of years. I'm now, me and Peter aren't exactly just down the road from each other. So making a film production is something we're going to need to plan out a bit more. And if we do another film, it will no doubt be under his label of Full Moon Productions. No, Devil's Avalanche Productions, not Full Moon. That's wishful thinking. So I have changed the YouTube channel to Ministry of Horror because at the end of the day, that's the output that I'm doing. So be sure, if you watch YouTube, search for Ministry of Horror. You'll see the logo. Give it a subscribe. You'll get the latest shows as they go out once we finish recording them, essentially. So before we jump into the horror news, let me just have a quick check on the chat while I buy time for finding my Stream Deck, because of course if we're going to do the news we need the jingle. So let's have a look. So Gruff had asked if we do it in a baby grow. Well, not currently yet. Victoria has inquired about a baby grow one day, and I'm sure that will happen. Eddie has said, look who it is, it's Braun Strowman, in regards to the Gruff. Because Eddie believes that the Gruff looks like Braun Strowman, who, that's a hell of a compliment. Braun Strowman is a big, muscly dude. So yeah, I think we're all kind of caught up. There's talk about Ministry of Horror mugs. It's Easter. Tez, treat yourself, the Gruff says. Well, yeah, let's be honest. I do have milk chocolate white buttons downstairs, so no doubt I'll be having those. And yes, you probably do hear Penny, she's making herself known as one of the pooches of horror. Bless her. She's probably seen a shadow walk by outside, and she's doing her protection duty. So Fran has said in the chat, wonder what your two favourite elements of Sweeney's performance are. I probably should have read that in my head before reading that out loud. Oh dear. Eddie the Beast, I've not watched the previous Ghostbusters before this one, so it'd be completely fine to hear spoilers. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, we do talk about Afterlife when we have our discussion a bit later on, so you'll get you'll get spoilers for that film to an extent in that. But yeah, we go heavy on the spoilers on the bonus show. Bericles, so is the conversation going on Ministry of Horror? Because you said Ministry of Slam, mate. Well, the conversation is going on Ministry of Horror, but obviously Lawrence was one of the big voices of the Ministry of Slam back in the day. Probably a bit of a Freudian slip if I've mentioned it going on Ministry of Slam. A lot of different ministries. Corporate Ministry, Ministry of Darkness, it's all going on here. Crimson Mail looks like a lot of exciting things are going on. Yeah, it's all going well at the moment. Film advanced screenings, can't complain. And Gruff in the chat asks, how is the Pooch of Horror after his op recently? Yeah, so the Pooch of Horror, Bailey has had his long delayed operation, and do you know what, he's been pretty much fine. His same old happy-go-lucky. He's probably calmed down a little bit, but yeah, all going well. Crimson Mel, I'm pretty sure I'd be in the unpopular opinion section on the current Ghostbusters. It depends. It depends what you think the popular opinion is currently, because you may be surprised about what I thought about the film and what Lawrence thought about the film. I won't bury the lead just yet, but we'll have that a bit later on. And Eddie the Beast, I've just subscribed to the Ministry of Horror page. Thank you very much, Eddie. Much appreciated, my friend. Right, now it's time for everyone's favourite jingle. It's time to get in some horror news. This is the news. There we go. Bosh. bosh. So all the news that I have comes from bloodydisgusting.com as per usual. Also, I believe that on the Twitch stream, it's once again failed to notify me of a subscription. So I believe that may well have been Bericles. Thank you very much, Bericles. If that was you for the sub, appreciate it. Always appreciate those subs, guys. Much thanks to y'all. So, as per usual, all my news comes from bloodydisgusting.com. It's one of my favourite sites for news updates, and to be honest, like X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, quite often their site is great for just dropping the headlines that you want to know or that you need to know when it comes to new releases or news from the world of horror. So do be sure to check them out on whatever platform. Doesn't matter to me. I don't work there. So they don't have a list of any new horror releases for this week. I believe we're at the end of the week now, so nothing really to discuss there. But first off, they've got a little headline here. Wolfman movie from Universal and director Lee Wannell moves to 2025. So John Squire's right up here. Filming kicked off just a couple of weeks ago on The Invisible Man director Lee Wannell's Wolfman for Universal and Blumhouse, which had been ambitiously dated for release on October 25th, 2024. As it turns out, however, a Halloween 2024 release was a bit too ambitious. Wolfman will now howl its way into theatres on January 17th, 2025. Wolfman stars Christopher Abbott as a man whose family is being terrorised by a lethal predator. Writers include Wannell and Corbett Tuck, as well as Lauren Schuker-Blum and Rebecca Angelo. Jason Blum is producing the film. Ryan Gosling, Ken Cow, Bia Sequeira, Mel Turner and Wannell are executive producers. Wolfman is a Blumhouse and Motel Movies production. The project will mark Wannell's second monster movie and fourth directing collaboration with Blumhouse Productions after The Invisible Man, Upgrade, and Insidious Chapter 3. In the wake of the failed Dark Universe, Lee Wannell's Invisible Man has been the only real success story for the Universal Monsters brand, which has been struggling with recent box office flops, including the comedic Renfield and period horror movie The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Giving him the keys to the castle once more seems like a wise idea, to say the least. So that is pretty interesting when it comes to this Universal monster movie rebrand. It's something where it's always kind of been a bit baffling as to what is going wrong. Where are things falling off in regards to bringing the monster movies back into the modern zeitgeist? When you think the Universal monsters, the mind automatically jumps back to those monster flicks from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 30s, 40s, really. It depends. Depends on which monster takes your fancy. But that's not without trying. We had the Wolfman film. I think it might have been called. Yeah, I think it was the Wolfman with Benicio del Toro. As mentioned, the Dark Universe, which was announced and then also failed at the first hurdle with The Mummy. And I didn't mind The Mummy. I mean, it is a Tom Cruise film. If you don't like Tom Cruise, you generally won't like it. And I understand that. He is a little bit crazy. But you take the craziness away from the films, he does do quite a lot of decent films, and I didn't mind The Mummy. That being said, it fell into a sort of similar criteria to the previous Mummy films. Not saying it's the same quality, don't get me wrong in that regard, but in terms of action-adventure film as opposed to horror, they had their moments of, light scares, but not horror films in terms of the horror films of yesteryear, which I guess if you looked at through today's lens, they're not traditional horrors. It's not traditional horrors, you know what I mean. They're not comparable when you think of modern horror to think of the horror of yesteryear. It's different ages. So there's been ups and downs, probably more so downs with the Universal Monsters being revitalized. Now, Lee Wannell, I've got a lot of respect for. Has been involved in the original Saw film, and had some role in the Saw sequels behind the scenes. Was involved in Insidious and directed Insidious Chapter 3, which is actually, I think, a very underrated part of that series. Chapter 3 is probably my favourite after the original. I just think it's got some really good scares in it. And Invisible Man was a real step up in, modernising that take on an old school monster film. I enjoyed Renfield for the most part. It did a good job at balancing light-hearted comedic moments with elements of horror. It wasn't full on, tear your face off horror, but it was, the strongest element of it was its performances. Like Nicholas Hoult, I think, did a great job as Renfield. Nicolas Cage as Dracula, I thought was absolutely brilliant. So they really worked well together, and it's a shame that it didn't do very well. After watching it, when I reviewed it for the show and looked up the metrics for it, quite surprising how poorly it performed at the box office. And Last Voyage of the Demeter is a film I still want to see, but I don't know what sort of UK release it had. If it got a cinematic release, it wasn't in the cinema for long, and I haven't noticed it anywhere on streaming. I mean, I'll have a quick look on Prime and just see, has it been released yet? Doesn't look like it's actually had a UK release. You can purchase the Blu-ray or the DVD, but they don't look like UK releases. They don't have the BVFC certification on them. So yeah, that leads me to think, when's it coming out in the UK? Really unfortunate. Really unfortunate. But yeah, if you're hyped for a new Wolfman film, or if you're a bit on the fence, but maybe you enjoy Leigh Whannell's previous output, this might pique your interest somewhat. Next up in the news, Flower Vale Street. Bad Robot's mysterious IMAX event from It Follows director gets title and date. This is a write-up from John Squires again. David Robert Mitchell, who did It Follows, is directing a genre movie for J.J. Abrams' Bad Robots. That's so secretive we didn't even have a title until now. And we also have a release date. Deadline reports state that the mysterious event movie from Bad Robot and David Robert Mitchell is titled Flower Vale Street, with an IMAX release set for May 16th, 2025. Now that we have a title and a release date, what about plot synopsis? Well, that part is still a secret. Literally no ideas is available for what Flower Vale Street is about at this time, but we'd like to at least recklessly speculate that it's a Cloverfield universe movie. It's more than likely not, mind you. This is a Warner Brothers Pictures project versus a Paramount release, for starters, but it's just something about that title that feels very 10 Cloverfield Lane, isn't there? The film is said to be an IMAX thrill ride, and the secretive marketing at the very least calls to mind Bad Robot's Cloverfield strategy. Our interest is mighty piqued, that's for damn sure. Stay tuned for more on Flower Vale Street as we learn it. Anna Hathaway, Ewan McGregor, Maisie Stella, and Christian Convery will star. Okay, so the fact that it is from the director of It Follows has me intrigued. Okay, it has my attention. Also worth mentioning, if you haven't heard, that he will be returning to the world of horror for the follow-up to It Follows, They Follow. We are getting a sequel, and Micah Monroe is back as Jay Height. It's kind of no secret on this show that It Follows is one of my favourite recent horror films of the last 10 years or so. I can't remember the exact release date, but I really enjoyed that. I feel it was a really unique and original idea, and executed well. It could have come across very comedically and not in a good way, but I really enjoyed that. So the fact we're getting a sequel, yeah, hyped for that. And I do like a bit of mystery. Fran in the chat says, in regards to this piece of news, Flower, in brackets Clover, Vale, in brackets Field, Street, in brackets Lane. Okay, well, there's a bit of the connection. Flower Vale Street, Cloverfield Lane. There are parallels there. there are parallels. And Crimson Mail also mentions previously that Tom Cruise Mummy wasn't bad. Thought it was decent, but 99 Mummy was better in my opinion. Yeah, they were more not coherent. I don't think that's correct, but well, yeah, I guess maybe coherent. I enjoyed the Tom Cruise Mummy. I certainly didn't think it was as bad as it had been reviewed, but it wasn't a start to end engaging thrill ride, whereas the original Mummy, I'm going to say the original Mummy duo because I don't actually think I've seen the third film. They were pretty good. And Crimson Mail also says Fran over here breaking down the code for us. It certainly makes a lot of sense. Next up, we've got more sequel news, guys. Another write-up from John Squires. Ready or Not 2? Sequel reportedly taken shape with Samara Weaving expected to return. We have the 2019 hit Ready or Not to thank for landing directors Radio Silence, the keys to the Scream franchise. The film released into theatres in August 2019 and scared up $57.6 million at the worldwide box office. The Samara Weaving starring fan favourite was made on a production budget of just $6 million, making it a nice little hit for Fox Searchlight. So where the hell is Ready or Not 2, you ask? Jeff Schneider reports on the In Schneider, that's a pretty good name actually, this week that Ready or Not 2 is in development with director Adam Robitel, who worked on The Taking of Deborah Logan, which I've not seen, Insidious, The Last Key, it's fine, Escape Room and Escape Room Tournament of Champions. The Escape Room films are fun. I think the first one was better than the second. He's currently in talks to direct the sequel. Schneider additionally reports that Samara Weaving will return for Ready or Not 2, once again playing the character Grace. In the first Ready or Not, Grace is a bride whose wedding night takes a sinister turn when her eccentric new in-laws force her to take part in a terrifying game. Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett directed Ready or Not. In addition to Samara Weaving, the cast included Adam Brody, Mark O'Brien, Henry Schnetzner, and Andy McDowell. If people haven't seen Ready or Not, it is a pretty fun film. Its essential setup is this new bride into this family. They have a legacy in the board game industry, I believe, but part of that legacy involves certain rules at a wedding, which involve taking part in a game where you have to essentially, from memory, select a card, and that card dictates what game you play. But unfortunately, the point of that game, it's kind of like, in this case, Ready or Not is hide and seek. Not hide or seek, hide and seek. But there are deadly consequences to it. And the reason for the deadly consequences are... There are reasons, essentially, without giving too much away if you haven't seen it. I mean, it's one of those films that was fun. I enjoyed it. There being a sequel, okay, sure. There being a sequel with Samara Weaving returning, I mean, she was great in the first film. I do wonder, though, what the plotline potentially could be, because it did feel like one of those films where it's kind of wrapped up nicely, which is why I think a sequel with a returning cast. Don't know. I kind of feel like you could do a similar story in a new setup, and that's where I potentially, unless there's a good reason for her character to be back, that's where I do potentially wonder: could you fall into the scenario of, there's now a bigger conspiracy and that was just part of one group, and there's this whole, that sort of thing where it becomes a whole, or the events you saw in the first film, they were just the tip of the iceberg. Things are going to get even crazier. It's a little bit of a tried and tested trope, or a tired trope, depending on how you look at it. I don't know. I enjoyed Ready or Not. I'm on the fence about a sequel. We shall see. I like to be proven wrong, Quick swig of the Max. Next up, John Squires by Discussion.com. Scream 7. Courtney Cox in talks to join Nev Campbell in franchise's next installment. Ghostface will return in Scream 7 for Paramount and Spyglass, and Variety reports this week that franchise mainstay Courtney Cox is in talks to return as Gale Weathers. Cox's Gale Weathers has been part of the franchise since the very beginning, with Cox starring in every single installment in the franchise to date. While Dewey Riley was killed off, spoilers, in the 5th installment, Gale just keeps on surviving, most recently beating the odds in Scream 6. How many more massacres can Gale manage to survive? Is her number finally coming up? It was recently announced that Neve Campbell will also return to Scream 7, with Campbell herself revealing that she'll be back as Sidney Prescott in the upcoming Spyglass sequel. Additionally, original Scream scribe Kevin Williamson will direct the film. Williamson recently wrote on Instagram, I think we've talked about this all last week, nothing else in this write-up is newer than what we've previously discussed. So I think Courtney Cox returning was probably a bit of a given. I think there would there be less outcry if Courtney Cox hadn't signed on, in the same vein that there was a bit of outcry with Neve Campbell not signing on to 6 due to the salary disputes? I don't know. I mean, Gale Weathers is quite an integral part of the core cast of Scream films, but it's kind of always been a Sidney story, and Gale's there involved trying to catch a scoop. I do feel there's only so many times you can do the story of she's part of the group, she's part of fighting back against whoever these masked killers are, and then by the time we get to the sequel, everyone's pissed off at her because she's cashed in on it and made another book, done another adaptation or whatever, because she's a reporter and, you know, whatever. But actually, she's not that bad person, you know, just things were taken out of context. You know, I feel like we've had that story quite a few times. Mel in the chat, I bet they kill them off. It's time for those characters to be retired. Yeah, I've talked before when it comes to Neve Campbell's Sydney. It's great having her in the series. She is the front and center of the series. By the time 5 rolled around and her involvement in it, and just the fact that she'd had a happy ending, it was like, so she's come back to kill someone when she is away from the whole thing and she's not being bothered and she's being able to enjoy quote-unquote horror retirement. So her not being in 6, I didn't really have an issue with. I enjoy Courtney Cox, her Gale Weather characters in these films, but I'm partially expecting that to be the plot line, that she's again sold out her friends or co-survivors for another money-making hit or whatever. And she gets punched in the face by someone, you know. Who knows? Who knows? I did like her performance in 6, and I think her fight scene was very good. And I did think for a time that would be it for her, but yeah. You can quite often get stabbed 100 times and not die in these films, so who knows? Fran in the chat, maybe not. With so much of the core 5, 6 not returning, if 7 focused on Sydney, it could be parallel to 6, so Cox wouldn't be there. Well, that's, yeah. I wouldn't necessarily mind that. I mean, it's no doubt going to be different killers, whether it's some form of returning killer or some relative of a previous killer that we've not seen yet for whatever reason. Who knows? What would their reason be for waiting so long? Who knows? I'm always intrigued with the Scream films as to what we're going to get, how we're going to get there. But yeah, Courtney Cox being back, yeah, okay, fine. It's a shame we don't have Dewey, but I think it was right for one of the old guard to get killed, and, you know, he's come close a few times. That made sense. I think if Courtney Cox does sign up and join Part 7, yeah, maybe it would be her time. That would add a bit of, you know, that would add some stakes to proceedings. Who knows? Who knows? We'll find out. We'll find out. Now, a trailer that I watched, which I thought looked pretty good, actually. This is another write from John Squires. He's a busy, busy man. Them, The Scare. Official trailer for Prime Video series brings the terror to the early 1990s. One of the most underappreciated decades when it comes to horror, I must say. Prime Video has released the official trailer for their horror anthology series, Them, The Scare, which will be premiering worldwide on Prime Video beginning April 25th, 2024. The best news? All episodes will be available upon release. Can't wait. Whet your appetite for terror by watching the haunting official trailer for Them, The Scare below. The first season of Them, now retroactively dubbed Covenant, debuted back in 2021, and the second installment of the anthology series will consist of 8 episodes. Them, The Scare will once again be set in Los Angeles. The story centres on LAPD homicide detective Dawn Reeve, who is assigned to a new case, the gruesome murder of a foster home mother that has left even the most hardened detectives shaken. Navigating a tumultuous time in Los Angeles, with a city on the razor's edge of chaos, Dawn is determined to stop the killer. But as she draws closer to the truth, something ominous and malevolent grips her and her family. The series cast includes Deborah Iorindi as Detective Dawn Reeve, Pam Grier as Athena, and Grammy-nominated musician and actor Luke James as Edmund Gaines. Rounding out the cast for the second season of Them are Joshua J. Williams, Jeremy Bobb, Wayne Knight, Carlito Olivero, Charles Bryce, and Iman Shumpert. Them, The Scare is a co-production of Sony Pictures Television and Amazon MGM Studios. Series creator Little Marvin serves as showrunner and executive producer with Mira Yoon and Roy Lee of Vertigo Entertainment and Steve Prinz. So I did check out the trailer for this before going live. Now, I didn't catch Them. And to be honest, when it mentioned that this was the second season, I was like, oh, a horror series on Prime? I wasn't aware of this. But I then remembered when Them came out, and I hadn't watched it because I remember just hearing it's incredibly brutal, which is a horror fan, you sort of think, well, that's kind of part of the course sometimes with horror, but also depressing. And I thought, oh god, not really into depressing horror. And I did read a bit of a blurb about an infamous episode. I want to say maybe episode 4 or episode 6. I'm not sure. But yeah, it sounded pretty full on, and I kind of thought, yeah, you know what, I'll give it a miss. I'll give it a miss. Maybe I need to revisit it, give it a proper watch, because Them, The Scare looks pretty good. The trailer doesn't give too much away. It does seem it feels very authentic for the setting of 1990s Los Angeles, but yeah, I thought it looked pretty creepy. So I'm going to be keeping an eye out for Them, The Scare. So talking about brutal and full on. Next up, another write-up by John Squires, Terrifier 3. And this is our last piece of news, I should add, before we get into Review Central. Terrifier 3. Damien Leone just filmed one of the most insanely horrific scenes of the franchise. Oh god, okay. Filming just that headline alone, if you've seen Terrifier 2, I'll just say, then for the director to say this, it makes me nervous. Filming has been underway for the last several weeks of Damien Leone's Terrifier 3, the next installment in one of the most popular new horror franchises of the modern era. Coming to theatres later this year from Cineverse and Bloody Disgusting, Terrifier 3 aims to raise the bar even further on the gruesome exploits of Art the Clown, and Leone has taken a little break from filming this morning to tease an insane sequence the team just got on camera. Damien Leone tweets from the set of Terrifier 3, "Can honestly say we just filmed one of the most insanely horrific scenes of the Terrifier franchise, and you'll never believe who couldn't handle it on set. The behind the scenes is hilarious. Can't wait for all to see." Considering 2022's Terrifier 2 had people throwing up and fainting in theatres, well, it's safe to say that nobody is prepared for the uncut brutality of this year's sequel. Stay tuned for more. Art the Clown is slashing his way through Christmas in the upcoming third installment, with David Howard Thornton back as Art and Lauren Levera returning as adversary Sienna. In Terrifier 3, Art the Clown unleashes chaos on the unsuspecting residents of Miles County as they peacefully drift off to sleep on Christmas Eve. It will release nationwide on October 25th, 2024, with Cineverse and Bloody Disgusting handling North American distribution, sold by the Coven, while also reps international rights. Who also reps international rights, I should say. Terrifier 3 is a dark age cinema production. Phil Falcone, Stephen Della Sala, Jason Levy, and Michael Levy produce. Wow. In the chat, Crimson Mail says in regards to Them, The Scare, it's set in his hometown. May have to give that a watch. Yeah. give the trailer a watch, Mel. It looked pretty good. In regards to this, so if you're new to the show and you're a fan of the Terrifier films, or you're aware of them, haven't watched them, I've talked in the past quite a bit about Arch of the Clown and the Terrifier films. The essential Cliff Notes bullet points are: wasn't impressed in the first few outings that I saw. All Hallows Eve, which is a anthology, didn't really like. Terrifier, I didn't really like. I appreciate his unique appearance, unique character for a new horror villain. And I think that's great because instantly recognizable, instantly stands out. And that's hitting a bit of a goldmine when it comes to horror, getting a new big bad booty daddy, big bad boogeyman. Terrifier 2 came out, and it is quite long. Doesn't need to be as long as it is. Performances range from pretty good to pretty shonky, but on the whole, it was a much better film. You have your introduction, you have your three acts of the film, which is general storytelling 101, and it was done pretty well. It is insanely disgusting in places. There's a particular death involving, I think, bleach and salt and other stuff that is just horrible. It is just disgusting. But you have some really great fight scenes in there as well. It's incredibly inventive. There's a few of these dream sequences involving Art the Clown with like an ice cream stand on like a kids' TV set. Really, 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 really unique, inventive, but ultimately disgusting. So when the director says they just filmed one of the most insanely horrific scenes of the franchise, I can't even begin to think what occurs in that scene, because Art the Clown has done unthinkable things, and you might be thinking, God, whatever, it can't be, geez, calm down, Tez. Going a bit overboard here. Yeah, maybe. But Terrifier 2 is one of those films that when I was watching it, I was just like, oh my god, surely he's just going to end it now. Nope, does something else. Does something else nasty to this victim. Doesn't really stop. Does not stop. Jesus Christ, for the love of God, stop. I will be watching it, I will. And if we get a cinema release, which I doubt it. Normally when there's a limited theatrical release in the States, probably not going to be getting a cinema release in the UK. Or some films do get a very brief run in cinemas, but you really do need to have your ear to the ground to know when a film like that is going to be having a release. I'd like to see it in the cinema. I think it'd be a lot of fun. But at the same point, I probably would be going to watch it by myself, because I really don't think, my girlfriend loves a good horror film, but I'm understanding what sort of horrors will just torment her, and I really don't think a Terrifier film would be appropriate. I think there'd be a lot of sleepless nights after that. So if it does have a cinema release in the UK, I feel I may be watching it by myself, and that's fine. But yeah, it does make me nervous when the director says something like that. Jesus Christ, save our souls. Anyway, that is it for the latest in the horror news. That was the news. Oh. Good thing about playing the song is I get to have a drink without having radio silence. A couple of comments in the chat about the big bad booty daddy. Yep, Scott Steiner would make a terrifying horror villain. I agree. So, jumping into our review extravaganza. We don't want the show to go crazy late. We've got a watch party to do. We've also got a big review coming up. So that'll be a good opportunity for me to stretch my legs. We're going to start off with a horror film that I watched literally about an hour ago, just over an hour ago, and that is the 2022 American horror comedy Slayers, written, produced, and directed by K. Asher Levin, stars Thomas Jane, Cara Hayward, Jack Donnelly, Lydia Hurst, Malin Ackerman, and Abigail Breslin. The film was released in theatres and digitally on October 21st, 2022 by the Avenue Entertainment. And this has only just come onto streaming here in the UK, and whilst it was made or released in 2022, I definitely remember discussing this one in the horror news like late last year. So I feel it may be one of those films made a couple of years ago but has only had releases in different markets much more recently. The tagline is "Vengeance Bites Back." So the setup of this film, where to start? I will straight off the bat set expectations by saying influencer. And we've talked about influencer horror films recently and how it's becoming a little bit of a trend. Well, that trend doesn't seem to be stopping, and this may be a bit of a forerunner in that trend. Slayers revolves around one individual and one group, essentially. That group are the Stream Team, which are Flynn, Jack, Liz, and Jules. They're a group of famous influencers who, of course, have an influencer house, because that was a whole thing at one time. They're a group of famous influencers who have been invited to the home of Stephen Rector, a billionaire media mogul and pharmaceutical engineer. But unbeknownst to the Stream Team, Rector and his family are actually vampires. They also meet, and we're introduced very early on to Elliot Jones, which is Thomas Jane's character. He does a lot of these voiceovers throughout it, giving us some backstory on the history of Slayers throughout time, also the history of vampires and their wants for power and the various ways they're going about it. Before I kind of continue, I mean, well, okay, I'll just say the general setup. This group are going to meet the Rector family. Elliot Jones is a vampire hunter. He has a good reason for being a vampire hunter, and this is probably maybe one of the few highlights in the film, and that is his backstory, which also kind of gave me the first idea of what this film was trying to be. We got a backstory in regards to why he became a Slayer, and this isn't too much of a spoiler because this happens in the first 20 minutes or so. I generally think that if actions happen in the first half of the film, at the very most, then not massively spoilers, they're part of the setup. But his daughter is murdered by a vampire. It sets him off on that course, the tragic origin story. And it is quite a good segment, but it also highlights one of the key issues with this film. And a funny thing, when I was sort of coming to that realization quite early on, actually, with this film, I only voiced it about the halfway point of the runtime, but I was really quite noticing it, was this was really going for the Zombieland vibe in terms of reliance on voiceover of the main character, in line with flashy edits. And that's the only way that I can really describe it, is overtly obnoxious, punchy text on screen, punchy edits every 5 seconds. You know, when a vampire kills a human, we suddenly get a scoreboard appear saying that vampires 1, humans 0. That's in line with one of these influencers being a Twitch streamer. We also then get all these moments where there's even a moment during a fight with the vampire hunters and the vampires, where one person's getting punched and it comes up with text saying like zonk, splat, kapow. And as we were getting to this part of the film, like the first half of the film, okay, to me it is a film of two halves. The first half of the film, okay, fine, it is trying to go for that Zombieland aesthetic of, you know, you have these actions and then suddenly it's the action freeze frames with a voiceover, with a, you know, witty quip, or wanting to be a witty quip, followed by some splash of on-screen graphic text. But by the part of the second half of the film, it just kind of felt like the editors were just sat there going, "Fucking hell, what do they want us to do with this footage? Like, all we've got is what's been provided. Let's just throw enough shit at the wall and see what sticks." I wanted to enjoy this film. I certainly thought, it can't be more than a 6 out of 10. Being realistic, in terms of just seeing the trailer, I knew what I was going into in regards to this world of influencers, and straight away there's always that inherent obnoxious tone there when it comes to the whole, "Hey guys, hashtag blah blah blah," that I know that's part and parcel of the content creator game or whatnot, but it's the stereotypical trope of the online influencer who's got 30 million followers, and you sort of think, how? By doing what? It has that vibe very much, and it ramps that up to not even 11, up to 15. And I do appreciate what it was trying to go for. It very much felt like it had that Zombieland blueprint in its mind, and it just so happens that Abigail Breslin was in Zombieland, and it's one of those things where it's just like, oh, that's a coincidence, because that's just how this is what that film kind of feels like it's going for. But it becomes such a struggle as the time is ticking on. It's only an 89-minute film. It really does become a bit of a struggle. Again, I kind of hate shitting on films, but when a film ends and my first thought is, well, that was a film, that kind of to me says it all. 3.5 out of 10. Yeah, Malin Ackerman is decent in this. She doesn't have that much to do. Thomas Jane plays Thomas Jane. He can be pretty good in things. He can be kind of wooden in things. There's different ends to the spectrum of this. I've never been blown away by performance by him. He's pretty good in The Mist. But everyone's pretty good in The Mist. It's a pretty good film. This wasn't, though. I think he does enough. I think he does well enough with what he is given. It just so happens what he is given is trying to follow a template that it's never going to live up to. And so we are left with Slayers, 3.5 out of 10 from me. Crimson Mail in the chat sounds like it's an annoying one. So in your opinion, what would have made Slayers better? So I don't necessarily think that we would need to dispel with the whole influencer setup and trope, because that is the world we live in this day and age. It may well, in 10 years' time, the world may look very different. It may instantly age it. But I don't necessarily feel that was the issue. And I don't mind a film with comedic moments. I think scale back massively on the Zombieland setup aesthetic, the tone that they were clearly going for with this. It felt like it had those aspirations, but it wasn't nailing them. And I would have to feel that when they're shooting this, or a lot of that stuff comes in post-production, but you'd almost have to feel that when they're doing these edits, surely you would see that it's just not kind of nailing that tone. I would feel scale back massively on those elements. Maybe have them still there with the voiceover, but just rein that in slightly. And there's moments of bloody violence, but there's also moments of just cheap cutaways. And there's fist fights that are quite poorly done and look quite amateuristic. And they're in a contrast, which again is why I said it's a film of two halves, because in the first half there is a zombie attack that is quite brutal. It is quite violent. It's not a zombie attack. What I'm talking about, vampires. I get on a train of thought and just have verbal diarrhea. It's not a zombie film. It's a vampire film. There's a vampire attack. The vampire's using its claws, and that's something that I always thought was pretty cool in 30 Days of Night. Was classic vampires do have sharpened nails, claws, and use them in slashing gestures, and that's one of those things that's kind of been scaled back over the years, where we've gone in the more romantic route of vampires, which I always think sucks, pun intended. Whereas I think that ultimately a vampire can masquerade as a human, to entice, but ultimately as a monster, and a monster should have monster tendencies, monster changes in its appearance, not just having fangs retract or extend. And so when we have moments like that, and then later on there's just some really amateuristic fighting, and real amateuristic is the only thing that I can really use, and it's a shame because you've got some decent actors in this. So that's if I was able to give my notes to the makers of Slayer while they're making it, that's the kind of thing I would say is, you're not hitting Zombieland. Zombieland was its own beast, like something like, Shaun of the Dead is its own thing. So go a different route. Try and run your own path. I know it's incredibly difficult these days to be truly original, but yeah, this wasn't it. 3.5 out of 10 for me. Next up, we're going is this found footage? It kind of is. It's also a bit lost media, I suppose, is the other sort of term that is more current these days. Horror in the High Desert. So I have heard some pretty good things about this series, and it is indeed a series. I believe that there is a sequel that is already out, and there's a third film which is planned. But this film kind of appeared one day in my Amazon Prime store section, and I kind of thought, okay, I don't know anything about this, but the artwork looks kind of interesting. Described as a documentary as well, but what's the story about? It had my interest from the off, and then when I heard that there were sequels, or a sequel with another one in development, I kind of thought at some point I'm going to have to get around to checking these films out, because I haven't heard much about them, but what I have heard is pretty good. And so this is now on Amazon Prime to stream, at least in the UK. And I thought, you know what? It's not going to cost me anything. I've got an hour and a half spare. Let's do it. So Horror in the High Desert is a 2021 American film written, produced, and directed by Dutch Marich in the pseudo-documentary format, and featured found footage elements about the mysterious disappearance of a hiker in the high desert region of Nevada. Now, when it says it's in the pseudo-documentary format, I'm not exaggerating when I say I actually, 20 minutes into the film, had to quickly go on Google, being careful to avoid spoilers, to see if this was a documentary. Because it is done very well in that style. There are plenty of horror films over the years that take the found footage format, but as opposed to just being, here's a blurb of text to say, 3 students went missing in the Birkwood Forest in 1996. This is the only footage found. Whatever. Not to be disparaging, because Blair Witch is incredible, but you know what I mean in terms of that's the setup. There have been films such as the Poughkeepsie tapes that take an approach of the film you're watching is a documentary of these events featuring footage that has been recovered in this investigation. Now, the Poughkeepsie tapes was better than I expected it to be. I thought it would be absolute trash. It is quite hard to watch in places, and I don't think it is as good as some of its renown has made it out to be, but it certainly does have a couple of really quite creepy sequences. Whereas this film took the approach of, it's only with some of the interviewees that I did think, okay, then they're maybe not quite as good actors as some of the other people, or they're seeming a little bit shonky compared to how they were in a previous segment. That's not to be too disparaging, I must say, but it's in terms of me starting to wonder if this was an authentic documentary that I was watching, means that I was getting tricked for a little period, which I think should be applauded. You may have already seen this film and thought, what on earth are you on about? It's clear that it was a fake documentary, in which case, hey, more fool me. I didn't do my research beforehand and showed my cards too early. But essentially, this is in the style of a documentary film. The first part of the film focuses on the police missing person report of an amateur hiker called Gary Hinge. Toward the end of July 2017, Gary hiked to an unspecified area in the Great Basin Desert of Nevada. His starting point was the town of Ruth, and his target was presumably a cabin he had approached on a previous expedition. When he was 2 days past his estimated return date and did not return home, his housemate Simon Rogers alerted Gary's sister, Beverly Hinge, who in turn notified the police. More than a week had passed since Gary had last been seen. So it's Gary's sister, Beverly, where I kind of started umming and ahhing about. Now I don't know if this is an actual documentary, because some of her interview moments are not bad. I don't think anything is really bad in this film, to be honest, but aren't as convincing as earlier segments. But you've got such a variety of interview segments where it jumps from like 4:3 aspect ratio to widescreen, depending on when the interviews were done, the location and equipment that was available for these different interviews, or if it was interviews passed over to the supposed, documentarians from previously recorded interviews. It has a feel of authenticity there, which I really thought was quite unique. And the performances of Gary Hinge in a lot of the recovered media I thought were quite interesting, because he really does come across like the kind of guy who, super nice guy, seems a bit introverted, but, wouldn't say boo to a goose, and is quite happy just doing their own thing. And that comes out through discussions with Gary's roommate, where he's just like, he likes to go off on these hikes, but I went with him once and I really didn't enjoy it. Essentially, you don't know where you're going. And he is really hardcore about not taking too much. You can't have too many provisions with you, because it is essentially like Naked and Afraid, or Naked and Alone, whatever it's called, but you're not naked, just alone. You're out in the elements, and you need to leave your phones behind, and kind of survivalist, which is something I would never do, because I'm too much of a wuss. But I can respect the people that go, you know what, this is what I'm going to do for the next couple of days to show that I can live off the land or live with limited provisions and survive in different conditions. And it's testing yourself at the end of the day. And I think, yeah, that's fine, fair dues. And it's through this investigation that, through this documentary and the investigation, where you then find that his pickup truck has been found. And okay, excellent, we sort of now know what area he's in, because the difficulty is if he hasn't taken his phone with him and he doesn't tell anyone where he goes, you have no idea where to start looking, because the high desert, Nevada desert, is massive. And it's not as if you can just send a helicopter up to look around, because especially areas with a lot of tree coverage, you can't see anything because you can just see the tops of the trees. So you really do start to understand why this search and rescue was a bit of a non-starter, because where can they go to find this missing chap? Further things are uncovered as to potentially where he may have been going, and that he has another online life that people didn't know about, and that he had interactions with people that his close friends or friend and his sister had no idea about. Which then lead us to a pretty shocking finale, actually. Quite a tense finale. Do we really get much of an explanation at the end? Not really, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that certainly adds to that level of intrigue where you can go, oh shit, what just happened? And I think when you have a reaction to an end of a film and you go, what just happened? And not, oh, fuck it, what? what just happened? You know, when you're more confused and annoyed, that's a negative. But when you're asking yourself, like, oh my God, what just happened? Because you've been invested in this tense moment, a bit of a cat and mouse moment. It works so much better. I have to say, I've watched a lot of crap on Prime for the sake of it being a service that's, you know, I pay for Amazon. Well, I did pay for Amazon Prime. My girlfriend pays for Amazon Prime. We're part of a, you know, kind of a family household thing. But it's a service that I've never had a problem with because you get free next day delivery on a lot of things. You get music if you want. It's not very good. You get Prime Video, which does normally have some really good mainstream films on there, some good TV series. You got variety. But when it comes to horror, because anyone can upload a horror film to Amazon Prime, you do have to go for a lot of shite, essentially. If you like a found footage film, I would definitely recommend Horror in the High Desert. I think what really kind of connected me to this film was it felt like watching The Last Broadcast for the first time. Now, The Last Broadcast doesn't necessarily hold up as well on repeat viewing, but The Last Broadcast was a found footage film, but in a pseudo-documentary style, similar to this, that came out around a similar sort of time as the Blair Witch Project. Didn't hit the same levels of notoriety and success, but the first time I saw the Last Broadcast, I was blown away. I thought it was really gripping, and the finale was pretty different, unique, different. Again, I don't think the film works quite well on repeat viewings, but it doesn't necessarily have to. If you have that initial viewing of being gripped, shocked, you know, intrigued, then it's done its job. And the fact that this had me at moments questioning in the first half of, is this an actual documentary? Because I'm gripped like a good documentary. I love a good true crime. You do sometimes get such an oversaturation with true crime where you see things are 3, 4, 5 parts and you think, fucking hell, they're going to drag this out. Or, oh my God, there's a lot to cover. This was more like, oh my God. I wonder if they're going to continue this story in the next film or if they're going to go in a different route. Are we going to get some clarification in the next film? I don't know. I haven't seen the second film yet. But I if you like a found footage, if you like a pseudo documentary, I think Horror in the High Desert is well worth a watch. It's not super high budget, but it's convincing enough in what it needs to do. And I'm giving it 7.5 out of 10. Let's have a quick look at the chat before we just move on. So, Crimson Mel in regards to Slayers. Fun fact, a stake through the heart was never meant to kill a vamp. It was meant to keep them nailed down into place so they could never get out of their place of rest to terrorize and harm people. I'd heard something kind of similar when it comes to vampires. I think it was like Irish vampires, that they would be buried or laid to rest with like a flower or something in their mouth, or there was something placed in their mouth to kind of stop them. There was some lore there, and I'm sure it was relating to Irish folklore or reports of vampiric-like bodies found with strange things left on their bodies. Eddie the Beast says, I'm doing a horror quiz right now. It's pretty fun. Gotta love a good quiz, especially when it's horror-related. And Crimson Melly's selling me on this one, Tez. I'm going to put it on the list. 7.5 out of 10 is what I'm going to give Horror in the High Desert. And if you have Prime, at least in the UK, it may well be available in other territories. Horror in the High Desert is available on there now. So add it to your list, ghouls and fiends. So, without further ado, we've still got the Immaculate review to do, and we're going to have that at the end of the show. We're already at 9:15, so this is going to be an over 2-hour show. But next up, I had a great time this week chatting to former host of the Ministry of Slam, host of Ministry of Marvel, back on the old MOS network days. Ministry of Slam is obviously now the Wrestling Arena, hosted by Bericles. He's the front man of Voodoo Vegas, tours the country with Don't Stop Believing. Ghouls and Fiends we're going to head over to a pre-recorded review of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire with the man, the myth, the legend, Lawrence Case. I will see you guys in a bit, but I'll still hang about once I've stretched my legs and got a beer. Enjoy.
We are recorded on the information superhighway. Glorious time zone to all. Glorious time zone to all.
We're back. It's Sunday. Was it 8 o'clock we used to?
8 a.m. Oh, wait. Can we share sounds, Tez?
Oh, God, how do I do that?
I've not booted up my stream deck. If I could share sounds, mate, we're all over it with some lovely Hannah Montana.
Oh, God.
Great stuff for you. We can get involved in all that.
Oh, no, it's not working. Oh, it's a shame.
Oh, no, damn it.
Lawrence, we are joined on the Ministry of Horror by returning guest, my good pal, Lawrence. How's it going, buddy?
I'm good, Ted. I'm good. How are you? How are things where you are in the world? You live further away from me now.
I do. I'm over in glorious Leighton Buzzard, aka Milton Keynes, for people who may think
Milton Keynes. Is the bowl still there?
It is, yeah, it's still there.
Do they still do gigs there?
I think Pearl Jam might be playing there soon.
Just car boot sales, probably.
Yeah, well, the thing with Pearl Jam is they used to be all Fight the Power, Fight Ticketmaster. Ticket prices like £200 plus.
Oh man, I saw Pearl Jam at the O2 a few years ago, and Eddie Vedder couldn't sing. He was pissed.
Oh, no.
He was pissed out of his head, drinking wine, and they cancelled the next night. They were rubbish, actually, to be honest.
No.
They were really crap. He was so drunk, he was just chucking tambourines in the crowd. He couldn't sing at all.
Well,
he actually lost his voice.
We've got a Meryl cameo in the background.
Oh, is she bring? Really? I think she's bringing me a cup of tea.
Oh, very nice.
It'd be interesting if she thinks and brings it to me in a Ghostbusters cup.
Oh, now that would be
she hasn't.
very.
She's bought it in my San Jose Sharks cup, Tez. She's down here.
Hi, Meryl.
I can't see myself anyway. Hey, Meryl. It's very professional. Very
professional.
There we go. It's wild, Tez. It's wild here on the time zone where we are in the world. So you're missing this podcast and stuff, Tez. I was just saying before you went live.
Yeah.
I said I missed the podcast, and this is lighting the fire, mate. Lighting the fire.
Well, we had a little brief bit of a catch up, but you mentioned you got the San Jose mug there. So you went on your travels, didn't you? You met the man, the myth, the legend, AJ Kirsch.
Oh, I did. I met AJ. Yeah, I met AJ. I saw the San Jose Sharks. I thought you were going to say, did I meet Sharky, the San Jose Sharks shark?
Oh,
no, I didn't. But I did go and see the San Jose Sharks, and I've fallen in love with ice hockey now, which is great. Although the San Jose Sharks are shit and they lose all the time. They've lost like 14 games out of 15. They're just shittest team in the NHL. It's quite good. I did meet AJ. We met up. We were out 3 or 4 times actually while we were over there. It was really good. Meryl and me sort of just decided we were like, should we go? Because we tried to go on holiday. We were thinking, where should we go? And we were thinking, should we go somewhere like warm in January? And then we were like, ugh, might be a bit shit. Probably won't like it. So let's go San Francisco. So we randomly we cashed in all our Virgin flight points with Tesco's Club Card points, and we ended up getting about 600 quid's worth of flights for free. So we put it towards our flights to San Francisco. And I messaged AJ. I was like, AJ, what do you reckon if we could come to San Francisco? Do you reckon we should meet up? And he was like, yes, definitely do it. 'Cause me and AJ have been talking about this for years since the original Ministry of Slam went off the air. AJ and me kept in contact. And we ended up going over there. He helped me with where to stay, close to him, what would be safe, because there's a lot of dodgy places over there. Oh. And we stayed in Berkeley, and I think we were there. Went out with him on a Saturday night. Went to a wrestling event in where did we go? We went to Sacramento with him. So we got in the car. We drove for about 2 hours to Sacramento. I was mega jet lagged, but it was wrestling in a brewery, Tez. It was brilliant.
Oh,
so
excellent.
They had this brewery called Track 7 Brewery in Sacramento, and there was a wrestling ring set up, and all these guys were just going full on wrestling in a brewery, and it was so cool because it was just like a hangout. People drinking beers, watching wrestling, drinking Mexican food, drinking like tacos, not drinking Mexican food or drinking tacos, but they were, it's just hanging out. Loads of people just hanging out. What's that game they got? The traditional American thing where you get the sack and you chuck it in a hole. Cornhole.
Yeah. Cornhole, corn dog,
stuff like that. It was awesome. So it was just like no kids were there, just all adults drinking, having a good time. Not I've got anything wrong with kids, but it was just like it was like an adult event watching wrestling in a brewery. Yeah. People just having a good time. But I was a bit jet lagged. That was great. And then Yeah, we done other stuff New Year's. We were there New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, saw my cousin who lives there on New Year's Day. On Tuesday, saw the Sharks. On Wednesday night, we ended up going out with AJ. Went to all these cool places. Went out for a meal with him and his lovely lady called Juliana. Went to some bars, did some karaoke, and then saw him again at Hoodslam. Went to Hoodslam on the Saturday on the Friday night. Man, if the wrestling at the brewery was crazy, let me tell you, the wrestling at Hoodslam was insane as well. And Mansoor wrestled as well.
Mansoor?
It was his first wrestling match after leaving the Fed. And it was Hood Slam is awesome. If anyone's in the Bay Area, go watch Hood Slam if you've got any interest. Even if you don't like wrestling, it's just such a great night. It's really awesome,
like a variety show almost, isn't it? But in a wrestling ring.
There was a wrestler called Meryl's favourite wrestler before we went to the Bay Area was Darby Allin.
Okay, yeah.
But now her favourite wrestler is Cereal Man.
Okay.
And he's this giant fat dude who has a box of cereal on his face, and his face is painted like the tiger from Tony the Tiger, so it looks like his face is a box of cereal. And he just wrestles, and they fill his head up with hot pockets and Doritos and things, and he just hulks up with Doritos in his. Oh, it's ridiculous! It was absolutely brilliant, mate. And some of it's brutal. Joey Janela was there and beating up women with chairs, and beating up his pet parrot with a chair. It was really funny. It was such a great night, mate. Such a great night. But yeah, great to meet up with AJ. Really good.
Oh, excellent, man.
So, that was a long spiel about going to the Bay Area. I've not podcast for over a year, Tez. Like, you said we'll be like 5-10 minutes. We're going to be on for 3 hours.
3 hours.
We're not even going to talk about horror for at least 45 minutes, mate. How have you been?
Where have I been? So we did a show. We did our first non-live show last week. Direct podcast feeds. Basically doing a review of a new horror film called Late Night with the Devil, which I was very fortunate to get to see before release. And I had a great time with that. The reception online's been really good. Victoria finally convinced me to get on the TikTok train, which I'd been so adamantly against for so long, but it seems to be working, just taking clips from the show, putting it on TikTok, and who knew? She's also just messaged me saying, "All in, let's go, baby." So she obviously heard us talking about AEW All In.
We'll have to meet up, mate, because we had a beer before. We'll have to meet up. And
we had a great time.
Mel and me are staying there, so we'll definitely have loads of time. So maybe you guys might do that. But you'd be so close anyway. We could all meet up earlier. It'd be really good and go for some scram.
Yeah, go get some food.
Some NEMOS listeners or Wrestling Arena listeners want to meet up as well. Let's do it. Come, let's all go to All In and do that meet up this time.
Have a proper day of it. And also, because I keep meaning to go to, there's like the biggest Forbidden Planet, like, all geeky sort of like comic stuff there as well. So I'll probably try and tie that in. But
what, near Wembley?
I mean, my geography is terrible. I know it's in London. I don't know how close it is to Wembley. But yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
I reckon they sell wrestling belts there.
But the thing is, if you wear a wrestling belt at an event, then you have to be prepared to defend it.
Oh, quite frankly, I was very pissed off at All In that there was people there with WWE belts. Did they not know that it was an AEW event? Quite frankly. I think it was disrespectful to Tony Khan's booking and the company that has been growing and is a fair competitor to the WWE. Wearing a WWE Championship belt at an AEW event is quite frankly very disappointing.
It's ludicrous.
I was very pissed off.
You don't expect to see that in this day and age.
No. I mean, it's just like wearing a PG Tips tea bag to a Tetley tea bag convention. You wouldn't do that. Two competitors.
You'd be asking for trouble, quite frankly.
Quite frankly, very pissed off.
But we're not here to talk wrestling. We are here to talk about a subject near and dear to our hearts. And we last had you on the show, having a great time. We talked about the Ghostbusters franchise, and recently there has been a new entry called Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. So before we start talking about the ins and outs of the film, Lawrence, watching Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, did Bustin make you feel good?
Is that burying the lead for the whole review, or should I say yes or no?
You can give a coy answer if you like.
I would say it was the Bobby Brown of Ghostbusters songs for me.
The best.
Yeah. Although it was the Run DMC of Ghostbusters songs, I think, actually.
Okay,
So
okay.
they did a song for Ghostbusters 2, Tez.
They
So
did,
they did the
yeah.
themes for Ghostbusters 2. Is it better than Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters song? No, definitely not. Is it a passable Ghostbusters song? Yes, it is.
But we're going to be talking about and reviewing Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. It's a 2024 American supernatural comedy film directed by Gil Keenan from a screenplay written by himself and Jason Reitman. Sequel to Afterlife, which came out in 2021, and the fifth film in the franchise total. That's including the one that we don't talk about. So the film stars Paul Rudd, Carrie Coon, Finn Wolfhard, McKenna Grace, Celeste O'Connor. There he is. Did you think, this is one of the first comments I had when I came out of the cinema, did you think that Paul Rudd just looked uncannily like Peter Venkman from the animated series?
I thought he looked like Ant-Man. Scott, I thought he looked like
Scott, I can't remember his surname.
Scott, whatever his name is.
Scott
Ant-Man. No, did he look like Peter Venkman from the cartoon series? No, because he just looks like Paul Rudd.
All right.
Paul Rudd, is he? He's just Paul Rudd. He never acts differently in anything he ever does. And he's great at what he does. He's just Paul Rudd. A bit like Bill Murray's generally always Bill Murray.
Yeah, so, that's true. That's true. And we did have Bill Murray back with Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and Annie Potts, along with William Atherton reprising their roles from earlier films.
Ridiculous,
yeah. So, going into Frozen Empire, we'll talk about the general gist of the film. Obviously, no spoilers. We'll talk about the setup and where the the characters are.
Question, Tez.
Yes.
Are we going to do a spoiler section?
Do you know what we could at the end of the show?
Oh, we could do a non-spoiler one for the live for the show, and then on the podcast, stick it in the podcast. So, podcast listeners, download the podcast. Hear our spoiler review.
Do you know what? Actually, yeah, let's do that. We'll make a mental note. We'll talk non-spoiler, and then we'll have an end. We'll kind of have a cut-off segment, and then we'll go into deep spoilers, and then we can put that on the podcast feed.
Get those podcast listeners up, Tez, as well.
Exactly.
Come on, do it, guys. Listen to the spoiler review on the podcast feed.
Exactly, man. Exactly. So going into watching this, what were your hype levels? Were you riding a high from Afterlife and excited to see what this was going to be, or was there any kind of feelings of we'll see how it goes? How did you feel?
What I found myself doing weeks leading up to it was making little noises subconsciously of excitement.
Okay.
So I'd sort of watch a trailer and I'd find myself just going, ooh, I didn't know what I was. I didn't realize I was doing it, and I think that was excitement.
Okay.
So I was getting very excited leading up to it. Yes, because I know when Afterlife came out, I was dancing in my kitchen just before I left. I was giddy. I was absolutely giddy to watch it, to see the original Ghostbusters back. Because it was spoiled that they were going to be in it way before. And of course, the marketing for this film had the original, it's not spoiler, it had the original Ghostbusters all over the marketing posters and everything. So to see those guys back was very, very exciting for me. I was just generally living in the world of Ghostbusters again was quite an exciting proposition for me to spend my time. So I love the world. And I never thought we'd get it because Bill Murray was always a stickler for never doing another Ghostbusters. And that was a holding point. And then like everyone knows that when Harold Ramis passed away, they said, let's just do the reboot with the girls. And again, that could have been good, but wasn't a great film. And then they done Afterlife, and that was such a great love letter to the franchise. And then the sequel came, and what a great world to live in as a Ghostbusters fan. Loads of Ghostbusters content coming out.
Exactly. We got the sequel to Afterlife. I had a great time with Afterlife. It got kind of mixed reviews when it came out, but to be honest, I thought it was brilliant. I still, on however many rewatches I've had of that, I still have my hay fever play up right near the end.
Who doesn't? Meryl and me watched it when we had our dinner before we went to the cinema on Friday to watch it, and we cried. Yeah. But I think that was such a great moment of the film. It's not. Myself. I generally think you're crying because of a real person, Harold Ramis passed away. But I think, of course, the idea is that gets to most people is that it reminds you of someone who in your life You might be have passed away, and you could have had that last goodbye with him. It's and then they fade off into the stars, doesn't it?
Exactly.
That's what it's like. You know, we've all got granddads and parents and loved ones and all these sort of things, and it gets you in the guts, doesn't it? That sort of thing, and you know, that's very well done. When that is a prime example of media really touching everybody in a great way. I think anyone who watches that is going to get you in the gut.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Exactly. I mean, me and my girlfriend watched the Ghostbusters films ahead of me going to see Frozen Empire, and she'd seen the first, and she'd seen the second one a long time ago. Didn't remember a lot about it, but hadn't seen Afterlife before. And it was really cool just seeing the reaction, like the moment when Ray in his occult bookshop gets the phone call. She was like, "Oh my god, he's here! It's him!"
Yeah.
And then the excitement when the Ghostbusters arrive, and then I knew because she, you know, she's in touch with her emotions. I knew that when Harold Ramis's Egon turned up, that would get her. It got me, but yeah, it certainly got her. She got very emotional, and
especially when like they all said sorry we didn't call you, and you didn't know. And then he sees him disappear, and that was brilliant. Yeah, it got me on me and Meryl again on Friday when we watched it. I think I was sitting once in the back of the Don't Stop Believing van watching Ghostbusters Afterlife, traveling back from somewhere up north. I don't know where it was. And probably crying in the back of the van, probably due to the hours of travel I had, but also because of the Harold Ramis thing.
Because of Harold Ramis, yeah. Well, this one, whilst that film was dedicated to Harold, for Harold, this one is dedicated to Ivan, the now late Ivan Reitman, who directed the original film, and this is also the 40th anniversary of the first film. So we'll sort of just kind of, I guess, we'll touch on some of the plot points, and then we'll kind of talk
Speaking
about...
of the 40th anniversary, Tez, I'm going to the Royal Albert Hall in October to watch it with the Philharmonic Orchestra.
Oh, wow.
They're going to play the score at the Royal Albert Hall. Ghostbusters 1, not Afterlife. How cool is that?
That is incredible.
It's going to be awesome.
Oh, that would be incredible, man. I'm pretty jealous.
Yeah. That's going to be really cool. I think it's sold out now. It's going to be amazing.
Oh, fuck.
I think it is. Have a look.
I'll have a look. I'll add it. Let me just open a quick. We'll open a quick tab. We can edit this out of the podcast. The joys of not being live. So
keep it in. It's good content.
So the film opens in 1904 New York City, and we see New York City Department firefighters finding a building, a gentleman's club, where all of the occupants have been frozen to death, and there's this, you know, phonograph playing this dodgy language that no one knows, and there's only one person alive who's wearing a strange suit of armor clutching a mysterious orb. And that's kind of our initial kind of setup for the film. So I mean, were you expecting this kind of... This is our first real sort of jump into the past in the Ghostbusters films. We haven't really sort of done flashbacks before, have we?
Yeah, not at all. No, I wasn't expecting this. Are we allowed? Are we spoiling now? Or are we doing?
Well, we won't go into like spoilers because we'll do general kind of setup, you know, of because people are going to know who the baddie is. They're not going to know when he comes in, but yeah.
Okay, because I've got. Shall I say what I would have preferred to have seen in this? In theory?
Yeah, of course.
So this is a flashback to the early 1904. It says 1904. And you know what? All these people we saw in this club and all this stuff, we didn't know who they were at all. It was just didn't connect to us. Do you know what I mean? As Ghostbusters fans or anyone who's new to the franchise. Do you know what I thought would be awesome in this film?
Mm-hmm.
Is instead of all this flashback stuff to this orb and this mysterious cult of Ghostbusters that existed, or the supposed Ghostbusters that existed, if it was a flashback using... You know, at the start of Afterlife, where you saw Egon, but you didn't see his face. You saw the guy running, and it would have been a flashback to just after Ghostbusters 2, 1991, because that's set in that's 89, maybe 91, 92, and it was a flashback to some sort of ghost using those same filming techniques of just behind the Ghostbusters. You hear Dan Aykroyd's voice, you hear Ernie Hudson, Bill Murray. Maybe they somehow AI a Harold Ramis voice. And it's just a 1 minute, 2 minute scene of them trying to bust this ghost. And it's the ghost that got away.
Okay.
And instead of this ancient, cult, whatever they were, I think it would have been much more touching to fans and to people who aren't massive fans like me, would have been like, wow. And it just used those filming takes. I think that would have been so much better than what this was through the whole movie, to be honest.
Okay.
I just think that I was hoping for that with this. Well, after when this film was announced, I was hoping they're going to show some sort of flashback to after Ghostbusters 2 of them still in their prime. But it was the ghost that got away. But that's what this film wasn't.
Yeah, show that kind of like there's a reason for there to be like a bit of an issue with the OG Ghostbusters and this villain, but at the moment, there is no kind of connection there. We are definitely going to have to. I'm going to have to make a note of some of the things to discuss spoiler wise, because there was a theory that me and some friends had going into this in regards to, are we going to lose in storyline another Ghostbuster?
Yeah,
and who we thought and why? Yeah, and I initially thought it's got to be Bill Murray, because we know he's not really that. Well, prior to Afterlife, he wasn't really that fussed with the franchise anymore.
Yeah.
So I figured it might be him. But then I was really getting a vibe that it could be Ray, due to a lot of his interactions that he has in this. There's a lot of discussions of, have you thought about what happens when you die? And I just thought, is this setting us up for a Ray death?
Yeah, I thought that. But again, no one, apart from the Egon and the Afterlife, no one really dies in these movies. I was thinking we might lose a Ghostbuster, an original Ghostbuster in this movie, but yeah, we didn't.
No, but we do see the new Ghostbusters team taking down a ghost in New York. We get the return of Peck, but one of the kind of the main through lines with this film is the subplot with Phoebe, who was a real standout in Afterlife, but in this, she's sort of struggling a bit, because where she is super intelligent, but she is also a kid. There's the rules and restrictions on being able to, have a job when you're under the legal age, and so she kind of gets benched and is dealing with those kind of issues of her place in the world. What did you think? Obviously, spoilers a bit later on, but what did you think really in regards to her kind of storyline in this film? Because
I didn't like it, Tez.
No, I feel that there was too many characters almost in this.
Yeah, I didn't like her story. I didn't like it, to be honest. Maybe on a second watch it would be better, because I know what to expect. But when we get to spoilers later on, remember, download the podcast, everybody. It was a bit of a, what's the word when things happen all the time in movies? A
MacGuffin?
Trope. It was a trope of
yeah.
these sort of films. For Phoebe's character, I thought.
Yeah, I mean,
didn't like it.
I quite liked what they did with Winston. With Winston's progression, we saw a bit more of what he's done with his money making for philanthropy. And I also quite liked the introduction of James Acaster, because I do find him quite funny anyway. And I think
Where's he from?
He does like stand up, and he's done a lot of panel shows. He's got a podcast called The Off Menu or something, where they bring on guests, him and Ed Gamble. I think his name's Ed Gamble or Ed Ball, don't know. And they bring on guests to say like what would be on their menu if they had to personalise it. And it's a bit of a comedy show, but yeah, he's a stand-up comedian, British stand-up. I thought he was a good addition, and I also think I really liked the character Kumail Nanjiani played.
Yeah, Nadeem.
I thought he was brilliant. I think he was a real standout in this.
When we get to spoilers, I've got thoughts on this. So I liked him acting.
Okay, yeah.
And his character was great, but his actual place in the movie, no.
Yeah. We'll talk about that. How did you feel seeing Walter Peck back? Now Mayor Walter Peck.
I feel like if you're going to have Walter Peck back, he needs to really interact with the original Ghostbusters more.
Yeah, we didn't. We
needed the Dickless meet up, and we didn't really get it, to be honest, with Bill Murray and him.
No. But now that we're in New York, we do get a few more kind of callbacks to the original film. Now, I think it helped because of watching all the Ghostbusters films except one in a day before watching this. But I liked a lot of the callbacks that Gary has the VHS, I think, of Cannibal Girls, which was discussed in Afterlife, but was also on one of the cinema screenings, I think, in maybe Ghostbusters 2. I like those little kind of callbacks. And we saw more of New York. We saw the library again. We saw the library ghost.
Yep. Yeah, that was good. I like the callback. There was a callback to lots more callbacks to Ghostbusters 2 as well. Because in Afterlife there was hardly any callbacks to it. So all the nerds were going, "Oh, is it canon? Is it canon? Ghostbusters 2?" But it is canon. So I quite like that. I was wondering it too. I'm one of those nerds.
No, yeah, I picked up on that in Afterlife because for me, for the longest time, Ghostbusters 2 was my Ghostbusters film because it was the first one I saw and it was always on TV, whereas Ghostbusters 1 wasn't on as much or was on a bit later because, a bit more kind of adult jokes here and there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed that. We saw the library and whatnot. For a film that is just under 2 hours, which is a bit standard these days, how did you find the pacing? Because I did find I found it. I wouldn't necessarily say slow because there were things going on, but it felt like it took a while for things to ramp up, and then it was really quick.
I thought it was all over the place. I was like, I mean, I made a face. We're doing this is audio podcast as well as video, but I went sort of as my face of when Tez asked that question because I thought it was all over the place, dude. I really thought it was all over the place. Where Afterlife was like very chill, and then Oklahoma, and it was just a like an indie movie, but with a Ghostbuster story to it. This was more like it was just mad. It was how much can we fit into 1 hour 55? I thought,
and I think with Afterlife, the pacing worked so well because we were being introduced to whole new characters essentially. We got obviously Egon, or assumedly Egon, at the start, and then later on we got, the introduction of, Ray and whatnot.
Yeah.
So we got to meet Gary, we got to meet Phoebe, podcast and all that. And so the time worked well to kind of build up these characters and who they are. And with this one, we've got all those characters, some being used well, others just kind of there. Like Finn Wolfhard's character, I mean, I didn't really think he did a huge amount in Afterlife. I mean, that wasn't a bad thing, but Trevor, I liked the whole story that he had with Slimer because I thought Slimer looked brilliant.
Yeah, Slimer was good. I liked seeing Slimer in the movie. We get to spoilers. There's a good part with him as well. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah,
I agree. Slimer was great. But I agree. There was like just so much going on. Like Murray's first scene, he was just there. He wasn't told why he's doing what he's doing or what's going on. He was just there. It's like, and it's just more of a we need to do Bill Murray interviewing someone like the memory test, or I don't know what the test is called in the original film. We need to do something like the original film, and it's more of like a set piece rather than a story piece, if that makes sense. It was just Bill Murray did this in the first movie. Let's do it in this one, and it was
where there were the complaints from some places with Afterlife that there's too much fan service, which to me I thought, I've seen films with too much fan service. This it all works. It was all it all meant something. It all had heart. Exactly. With Frozen Empire, this to me in places felt a bit more like, oh look, there's the hat that Rick Moranis wore in the first film when he's being tested. This felt a little bit more like fan service for the sake of it in places.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, like they've got all this new tech, but they're still using the colander on his head. And all the old computers. It was a bit weird, and it just felt like it was set pieces rather than certain bits. But that Bill Murray one for me, the first one, felt like a set piece rather than a story.
Yeah,
he wasn't told what was happening. We need you, Venkman, to come here and do this. He was just, Bill Murray's here now doing this.
Yeah. One thing I did quite enjoy in Frozen Empire is when we got to the library, they meet Patton Oswalt's character, who gives them some of the information on what they're going up against, Baraka. And usually in the Ghostbusters films, they're doing their research, and then we see, they found in a textbook the information about like the building and whatnot. But in here we got kind of the story of this ancient god played out through like stone hieroglyphics, which I thought was quite a nice little touch.
I didn't like it.
You didn't like it?
No, I didn't like it. Just I didn't like any of that throwback stuff, or not throwback like that. Looking at the past hieroglyphics stuff,
okay.
I didn't like the going back to 1904. I didn't like any of that. I think it could have been done better. Ray could have been the Patton Oswalt character. and turn up a bit later, maybe. And then he said all that stuff about the ghost that got away or something. I think again, Patton Oswalt's very funny. I think he's just thrown into the movie. I wasn't keen on that, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think some characters who were highlighted quite well in Afterlife as, additional, funny characters or whatnot in the background, weren't necessarily essential here. Like, Podcast kind of felt a bit tacked on, and I thought he was quite funny in Afterlife.
He was good with Ray.
Yeah. I, to be honest, actually, thinking about it, I did quite like their podcast show, their live show, where they have items that are supposedly haunted or whatnot, and if they prove not to be haunted, then he just smashes them with a sledgehammer. That was kind of funny. In terms of the villain, what did you think of? I kept wanting to say Baraka, but it's not. It's Garaka. What did you think of Garaka?
Not a massive fan compared to Vigo or the two Gozer movies.
I kept wanting there to be I know obviously by the end of Ghostbusters 2 the portrait is gone, but I kept wanting there to be a Vigo portrait just hung up somewhere as a little nod to Ghostbusters 2.
The thing is with like both these villains from the first two movies and Afterlife, they've got quoted lines like, "Are you a god?" Things like that. And Vigo, "Now what was will be, what is will be no more. Find me a child so I might live again." Things like that. Quoted lines from these baddies. Garaka had nothing like that. But I felt like the whole movie didn't have quotable lines. No. I've only seen it once, but there wasn't anything that was like a quotable, Ghostbusters or saying something like line or a baddie saying something. It just didn't have anything quotable, I thought.
And I think go on.
I just think that's one of the big problems. I think everything just so much was shoved into here to try and tick a load of boxes.
I think you're bang on the money there, because when you think Ghostbusters, you think key moments, quotable, like you say, quotable lines. Bill Murray obviously had tons of them in both the first two films, and even in Afterlife in his small role along with everyone else. With Frozen Empire, I can't think of a particular line. And I think the thing is with the Ghostbusters films 1, 2 and Afterlife, there are moments with even just dialogue where you can't help but smile or go, here we go, get a little bit excitement. I didn't really necessarily get that in Frozen Empire. I didn't get any particular moments. We talked about the emotional moment in Afterlife near the end.
Yeah.
And not necessarily an emotional moment in this, but I didn't get any particular moment where I was just caught up. I had fun. It was a fun film, but I didn't have any moments where I was just like, I'm strapped in. I'm in the zone.
Or bits where you got pumped, like, let's go Ghostbusters, let's save the day. It was like when they're locked up in the insane asylum in Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah.
And, Lewis comes and saves them, and it's like, we're the only ones that help, and you'll bet we are, and then they'll jump into the Ecto 1A, as it is, and boot down to the museum to save Oscar the baby. And why is Oscar in none of these sequels?
But you'd think that would be a perfect kind of callback.
James Acaster could have been Oscar. Could have easily. Who's this? This is Oscar.
Well, yeah, because Oscar Barrett. Oscar was what, like 8 months, baby. I want to say, in 1980. When the second one? 1987?
1989. So he's just under. He'd be 35.
Yeah, 35, and James Acaster's probably 35.
Yeah. They need to have Oscar in these films. Oscar would have been a great throwback, and a really good throwback, and he interacted with Venkman.
Yeah, exactly.
Stepdad, yeah, would have been really good.
Oh, we need to be writing these Ghostbusters.
We need to rewrite Ghostbusters Frozen Empire.
So,
did you hear there was uproar with all the Ghostbusters cosplayers, because in all the trailers and even on this poster you've got on the screen, all the Ghostbusters wearing this red coat, and the red coat was hardly in the movie. So all the cosplayers went out and spent loads of money on this red coat to have accurate costumes. And then the red coat's only worn by Lucky for about 5 seconds.
Oh,
that's it.
God.
It's a bit like buying a wrestling belt and it not being the one that's used in the match you really want to see.
Yeah, I got this wrestling belt, but now they've got a custom one, so this is out of date. It's just worthless now.
Quite frankly, the spinner belt is not the proper WWE Championship.
I only recognise the big gold bow. It doesn't have the same lineage.
Like, oh, God, I'm very pissed off.
So, what? Okay, well, before we kind of get into like a score, and then, as I say, we'll continue on to do a special spoiler bit a bit in a moment. Let's talk about kind of like highlights, lowlights of the film. Like, what would you say was a particular highlight for you that stood out watching Frozen Empire?
I would say a highlight was, again, seeing the original Ghostbusters in their gear. That's great. I think seeing the Ecto-1 bombing around New York was good at the start of the movie.
Yep.
That was cool. I think seeing the ghosts, all the different ghosts, Pukey and the other ones, and how they keep them contained and kind of experiment on them was quite good. And one of the best ghosts was Slimer.
Yeah.
Slimer in this felt like more like Slimer from the cartoon than Slimer. He felt more like Slimer from the cartoon than Slimer's ever felt like Slimer. Especially, we'll get spoilers a bit later on. But yeah, he really felt like Slimer from the cartoon, and that's great. That's not a bad thing. That's really good. What about you?
Yeah, so Slimer, I think, was a big standout because I mean, he's such a is a key part as a side character of the original. Well, he's in the second film as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
Briefly, but he was a real integral part of the cartoon, and I grew up with the cartoon. I loved it, so it was great seeing him, and he just looked brilliant because it wasn't like they went overly CGI. Like they sort of had this just unique look where it's like it looks like it's done, you know, real with puppets, and then they just sort of touched it up with CGI.
Yeah.
The ghost looks great. I thought Slimer looked great. I thought Kumail Nanjiani's performance was really entertaining. Like he just had some good funny lines.
Did, yeah.
And so he did get a few laughs out of me.
Did you laugh a lot in the movie? Did you laugh as much as a previous Ghostbusters movie?
No. There weren't belly laughs. There was, you know, a few chuckles, and they were primarily with Kumail Nanjiani's character. In terms of lowlights, Paul Rudd kind of felt like he was coasting a bit, and it hurts to say that because I love Paul Rudd, but he was really humorous in Afterlife, and he's not bad in this. He just doesn't have that much to do, and he's playing that role of sort of trying to be the stepdad, you know, he's the boyfriend of Carrie Coon's character, and so he has this storyline, you know, mainly with Callie and Phoebe. But he sort of felt a bit underutilized. But I think the difficulty, and this is the other negative, was it just felt too crowded, and the pacing. Yeah. The pacing.
Callie wasn't needed in the movie. Callie Spengler wasn't needed.
No,
at all. I mean, you could have had Ray play the Patton Oswalt role. Even Janine. I mean, I know she's there for nostalgia and to see her in the Ghostbusters uniform, which isn't a spoiler. It's in the trailers.
Yeah, and that was a cool moment. Actually, I quite like that.
She didn't do anything.
No, but it was a nice moment. But yeah, she didn't actually do anything.
There's a few Ghostbusters lore things that I don't like that I'll get into when we can talk a bit more spoilery. And I really don't like it, to be honest. As a guy who can pretty much quote the whole movie line by line and the second movie, I bought the game like from America months before for loads more money. The 2009 game.
Oh,
just so I could play it on my Xbox early because it wasn't getting released in the UK for ages.
Yeah,
you know, I'm a massive Ghostbusters fan, and there was law breaking things I did not like. You know, to get my wrestling voice on, I thought it, quite frankly, pissed me off.
Quite frankly, the whole law has just been the law book has been torn up.
Frankly.
So if you to wrap up the review, and we will have a separate segment which will go into another podcast show for spoilers. If you had to give this a score out of 10. Currently, and I tend to find with some films, I sometimes need to watch them a couple of times, but other times I think
I need to watch this again.
Yeah. So on a current basis, thinking that your score may well change, it may go up, it may go down. How are you currently feeling on Ghostbusters out of 10? And you can use decimal points if you want.
I would give it. A six. Tez.
Do you know what? I'd agree with that. When I was coming out of the cinema, we were initially sort of me and a couple of friends were just we all had the mindset of, you know what, I enjoyed myself. It wasn't a bad film. It wasn't up there with Afterlife, and for me, Afterlife is an easy 8. Easy 8.
Oh yeah.
So at the time, I felt 7, but it's one of those things that when you then start talking about it and actually then thinking about moments here and there, for me, at most 6.5 currently. So yeah, I'm with you around the 6 mark. It's certainly not a 4, which IGN gave it. I think that's ridiculous.
No, I mean that's mad. And they gave the girl Ghostbusters film like 8 or 9, something stupid years ago. I mean, I think IGN sometimes have it as an agenda.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that now.
All big media does, Tez. All big media does. Not just viewers, but the news. The national news has an agenda, Tez.
They do.
Let's get into that.
We'll save that for the spoiler cast. But we'll give Ghostbusters Frozen Empire a 6 out of 10.
Oh, I like the 6 on the screen.
Oh, that's my little numerical.
Did you have that already typed?
No, I wrote that out just then and then.
Wow, we both gave it 6.
There you go. Look at that.
Freaky times. Talking about freaky times, I'm going to do a bit of a plug here, Tez.
Of course, yeah.
In case anyone doesn't check out the spoiler review, and you might want to check this one out.
Okay.
Next week I'm going to be joining Crimson Mel for my second podcast in 2 weeks. I'm back podcasting, Tez, to talk about 2 ghost hunts I went on. So we're talking about the movie Ghosts. I went on 2 ghost hunts in this last week.
Oh, wow.
In the last 2 weeks at Shepton Mallet Prison and Dorchester Prison, ran by the program called Most Haunted.
Oh,
the Yvette Field one. And let me tell you, listeners, Ministry of Horror listeners, some shit went down.
Yeah?
Some shit really went down, for me especially, on the second one. And I'm going to get really into it with Mel next week. So check that out on his YouTube channel.
Yeah, so his Unexplained Possibilities, is that right?
Yeah, we're going to be going live at 10 o'clock UK time next Friday. Does that doesn't clash with Ministry of Horror, does it?
No,
Friday.
Fine.
It's April 5th because he lives in California. So we're going to be going live on his channel on Friday, but we'll also be putting out on the podcast. So I'll promote that on all the social medias. Much like this, we will. But yes, some shit went down, Tez. It really did. Because I remember when we were doing MOS, I was saying I'd like to go and do one. You've done one, haven't you?
I have. I went in there very much a skeptic, and I consider myself an open-minded skeptic. I don't assume, that things must be supernatural. But if something happens that I think, well, I can't explain that, and that did. I had a couple of moments that I just thought, okay, this is a little bit freaky.
Well, all right, I'm not going to say what happens, but it affected me for about 2 days after.
Oh my god!
Up until I went on Saturday and Monday, I was still feeling nervous, if that's the right word. I was feeling something, mate. It affected me quite bad. Or good, I don't know. So tune into that show next week, Ministry of Horror listeners. It's some shit went down.
Oh man, excellent. Well, yeah, guys, check out Unexplained Possibilities. Crimson Male shows a former guest on Ministry of Horror, so make sure to support that and make sure to check out Lawrence on there talking about his ghost hunts.
We're live. Going to be live with the chat room, that one.
Going live, excellent. Well, for this part of the show, we're going to be going back to the live show, but we will obviously stick around. Thank you very much, Lawrence. And where else can people catch you if they just catch this moment of the show?
I am touring the country singing with Don't Stop Believing. If you want to hear Summer 69 sang better than you've ever heard it sang, or even Built the City, come check out this show. I mean, if you haven't heard it enough, Summer 69, come and see Don't Stop Believing. You'll love it. So I'm touring. Oh dear. I'm not going to tell anyone from the show I did this. So yeah, come and see Don't Stop Believing. I'm touring around the country, and check me out on the Instagram. Just search for Lawrence Case _. That's where I post a lot of stuff up on there. So that's a good place to see. And I'm going to be an All In, so we'll just meet up there. And yeah, I'm coming to a town near you. I've got about 58 gigs from April 1st till November. So I'm going to be a busy boy. But I won't be back podcasting, Tez. This is fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. I think the airwaves are missing, your dulcet tones, dude. So it's been a pleasure, obviously, having you back on the show, and I think we all want you back doing something on the airwaves.
I hardly get to talk to him. Don't Stop Believing, Tez. So hence why I've had verbal diarrhea happening.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. So at this stage, we're going to go back to Tez in the studio.
Bye, Tez.
Well, look at that. We are back with Tez in the studio after speaking with Tez and Lawrence. I hope you had a great time listening to that segment of the show. Obviously, I've been catching up on the chat. People who have seen Frozen Empire, let me know your scores in the chat, or if it's on your agenda to watch. Has hopefully the review has given you an idea maybe of what to expect without going into any spoilers. But if you do want spoilers, or if you do want to hear our thoughts at some of the plot elements which we couldn't really go into in that review, then I believe 9 a.m. on Monday, podcast feeds should be getting a bonus episode. It's about 35 minutes, and also on YouTube it'll be dropping about 9 a.m. So be sure to follow, subscribe, whatever the appropriate thing is on the platform that you use on either of those, and there you go. You'll get our in-depth, spoiler-filled views on that. So thank you once again to Lawrence, Voodoo Rocks on various platforms. Lawrence, check him out, Voodoo Vegas, all that good stuff. Don't Stop Believing, and of course, Unexplained Possibilities, Crimson Mel's podcast, live show going out next Friday with Lawrence on the show. In the chat, Gruff has said 6.5 for me. Like you, I came out having enjoyed the film. It's good fun, but it has its problems. Yeah, I agree. It's, I didn't come out feeling deflated or overtly negative. It's just not up to the level of Afterlife. It's decent. It's got its problems. Agree. That's an appropriate way to look at it. And no problems, Mel. Thanks for the shout out. Tez Mel says no problems at all. Looking forward to the show. And yeah, I think I speak for everyone when saying we miss Lawrence being on the airwaves. So any Lawrence on a stream or a podcast is good. It's a good time. So that brings us to our final review of this bumper episode. I went to the cinema with my girlfriend to watch the latest Sydney Sweeney horror film, Immaculate. I went into this not knowing really anything about the film. I'd seen a trailer, I think possibly in the cinema for a different film, and had seen mainly things online talking about, oh god, terrifying, people are jumping out their seats in the cinema shocked, it's engrossing. And I kind of thought, okay, well, I'm going to see what we've got here. I'm not going to look into anything. I'm not going to read any blurbs. I'm not going to look into too many trailers. Go into this one fairly blind, but it's a 2024 American psychological horror film directed by Michael Moen, written by Andrew Lobel, and co-produced by Sydney Sweeney, who also stars in the film alongside Alvaro Motta, Benedetta, me trying to be a smart ass and pronounce names, Benedetta Porcaroli, Dora Romano, Giorgio Colangeli, I'm really sorry if I'm offending anyone, and Simona Tabasco. The film's plot focuses on a young woman of devout faith who is invited to reside at a picture-perfect Italian convent, but slowly realizes that the convent harbors terrifying secrets. So, the film opens, Sister Mary sneaking into her superior's bedroom at night and stealing a ring of keys to escape through a locked gate of the convent. But she is followed and captured and knocked unconscious by three hooded figures. So, the hooded figures in this film are one of the scary imageries approaches taken, and it is quite effective, is nuns, but their faces are covered by like a red fabric. It is quite a striking image. You could potentially have used that a bit more because it's not overtly used. There's moments of it being used, and it's, I suppose, more so to hide identity or those of a maybe a whatever position. I'm gonna try and be coy, try not to go too much into details, and certainly not really spoilers. But it's quite a useful image that isn't overtly used. It's maybe a little bit underutilized, perhaps, for baddies, to put it lightly. But we then introduce the Sister Cecilia, who's Sydney Sweeney, who's turned to religion at a young age after she nearly drowned in a frozen lake and had been declared dead for 7 minutes, convincing her that God had saved her for a purpose. At which point, due to economic changes of her parish back in America, she receives an invite from Father Sal Tedeschi to join an exclusive convent in Italy that tends to dying nuns in their last days. But there are some odd things going on at this convent. She's noticing wounds in particular shapes, along with particular items that have, let's say, historical significance. Again, trying to be too coy, try not to jump too much into things. I can't really remember how much the trailers give away. Which then leads us into the bulk of the story. And again, it's difficult because I don't want to say too much, but the title Immaculate, all I will say is think Immaculate, that's the title of the film, think heavy religious tones, and try and make some connection as to a plot theme of the film. Again, I don't know how much of that is in the advertising as to how much I can kind of say without giving a big beat of the story away, but it's the main plot of the film throughout is in regards to the said title of the film. And we focus predominantly on Sydney Sweeney. She is our central character who is noticing strange things going on in this convent. And she has a friend, Sister Gwen, who, similar to her, has come from different sorts of hardships, which have led her to the convent, but she is a bit more outspoken, a bit more streetwise, I should say, and a bit more relatable for Sydney Sweeney's Sister Cecilia to get along with. And that's when things start changing and mysterious immaculate things occur, that she is essentially our voice of reason, our voice of, well, wait a minute, something isn't quite right here. Is no one going to ask questions about what's going on and why we can't leave the grounds to seek advice from professionals outside the grounds? Again, super coy. And if people have seen the film, they'll probably understand why that is. We have some good moments of tension peppered in. It's not jump scare heavy. There's a couple of jump scares, but they are fairly effective. It does have a few toe-curling moments of either violence or body modification. There's a particular moment during a confession where a particular act of minute dismemberment, I don't know if that's the appropriate term, is performed, and it felt like it wasn't a packed cinema. It was a daytime screening me and my girlfriend went to, and I think everyone was kind of just squirming in their seat at this particular moment because it was drawn out, it was graphic without being too gratuitous, but you could see everything that was occurring, and it was quite nasty. Just because it's one of those things where it's you would imagine that's just horrible. Along with some quite scary moments in places. Sydney Sweeney's performance, she's pretty good in this. I mean, she's a name that is bounded around quite a lot recently. She's had starring roles in rom-coms. I believe she came from a TV show called Euphoria. I've never seen it. I'm sure the blurb talked about teens with addictions, and I thought, oh, it's not for me. doesn't sound like my sort of thing. But she seems to be the current it girl, as Florence Pugh was a few years ago. Sydney Sweeney's maybe kind of going through that period. Who knows? I don't know. But she's pretty good in this. I can't say anything negative really about her performance. In terms of like I mean, I guess another positive I should mention is Vix really enjoyed the soundtrack, because a number of the songs in the score that occur, and it's quite a, so there's religious tones there. There's a lot of choral work, and Vix is part of a choir. And only earlier that day, she'd gone to a singing lesson, and a number of the songs that she'd been practicing had then ended up being performed as part of the score in the film. So that's quite a cool moment for her to suddenly think, oh my god, that's that song. Oh, that's also this song. There's a nice moment there. I don't think there's necessarily any negatives in this film. I think the story moves at quite a decent pace. The finale is quite brutal. I think that's fair to say. It is quite full on, and a lot of tension in the final 10-15 minutes, I think, has to be said. But there just felt like there was something holding it back. And I can't. The difficulty is, it's not as if I could say, well, this performance wasn't that great, or, well, this part of the story wasn't that great, or, well, the score was a little bit flat here and didn't elevate things to a higher echelon. It's not. There weren't really any direct glaring negatives like that. I think the story was fine. It was unique. It had, some parallels between science fiction, Rosemary's Baby, things of that kind of similar ilk of religious horror. And there's certainly some moments that I think people of the cloth, or people entrenched in religion, may well have problems with, because there's certain moments where things are used as weapons, which are probably a bit uncomfortable for those of religious tendencies, of which I'm not, clearly. Yeah, it felt like it was good, but it just felt like there was a secret sauce missing. And I can't for the life of me think what that sauce would be, which is difficult, and it feels almost unfair to knock a score down, perhaps, for a film based on something I can't quite explain. But sometimes you just have a feeling where you enjoy something, but it's like with video games. You get some games that you play and you're like, yeah, that was good. Story was decent. Gameplay was fine. Story, game length was fine. It was good. End boss was pretty good. But there's just something which takes it away from being, wow, that was an incredible experience. This moment in particular was brilliant. And it's just the secret sauce, I guess, is the only thing I can say. I'm going to give Immaculate a 7 out of 10. I think it's a pretty good horror, and at the end of the day, support horror in the cinemas. It's the best way to support these films, so we can get more films. Otherwise, horror's never going to die, but we can always end up with a straight to not video now these days, straight to streaming. That's not necessarily always a bad thing, but you also get absolutely tons of horseshit, unfortunately, in the straight to streaming pile of dung. We'll have a quick look at the chat. So, talk about Crimson Mel's podcast. It's a live show, 3 p.m. PST, 6 p.m. EST, which is about 10 p.m. UK time. Obviously, time zones. I'm terrible with time zones, but definitely check out Unexplained Possibilities. Eddie the Beast is back from his quiz. Crimson Mel has said, Immaculate is one of those not bad, but that oomph isn't there. I think this is one of those movies where a spin-off or something to expand it would do it good. Yeah. Definitely agree with that. Whether that would be a prequel film, there's potential for a sequel, potentially, but I do also feel the ending itself was very shocking, and so if there were to be some expansion, I wouldn't necessarily want it to focus on Sister Cecilia, but maybe things that happened in the past, or maybe concurrent events with then a later in whatever the project were, whether it be a TV or film, whatever, then have a connection with Sister Cecilia later down the line. I'm not too sure. Not too sure. But yeah, it very much is, yeah, extremely shocking ending. Crimson Mail says, I'd even say disturbing. Yeah, if you were to explain to someone the events that occurred in those final few minutes before the credits rolled, their reaction would probably be, what the absolute hell, whether that's appropriate, went on there. It is shocking, but gonna give Immaculate 7 out of 10. Okay, Ghouls and Fiends, thank you once again for watching the Ministry of Horror live on twitch.tv/Tezius, TEZZIUS. Or if you're catching this on YouTube later on, or if you're catching this on podcast platforms, be sure to give a follow, like, subscribe, whatever the appropriate terminology for the format you're using is. Monday, 9 a.m. UK time, the bonus podcast will drop, spoiler-filled review of Ghostbusters Afterlife. And at some point next week, I will be recording the next edition of the non-live. I'll just call it the next show. We know that we're doing a live show every other week. The alternate weeks will just be a podcast show, which will have a retro review, which I believe it's not in reach at the moment. I don't want to suddenly have dead air while I'm trying to grab it, but I believe my retro review for next week will be The Abominable Dr. Phibes. Had a bit of a recommendation of that a little while ago. We've got plenty of films in the Discord for retro reviews, so there may be the odd week where we've got 2 retro reviews, but if you'd like an older film to be reviewed, drop me a message on the Discord or on X, Twitter at ministry_horror with retro review requests, or modern film reviews. If there's films that have been released in the last few years that you'd like a review of, just drop me a message wherever I am on socials, Tezius, Tez Elliott, whatever, wherever you find me, and I'll be sure to give it a watch and give my thoughts on it. So stick around, we're going to be doing a watch party, but otherwise, catch you Ghouls and Fiends later on.